no matter how balanced or how shielded or how open you are, there is a level of anxiety in the world right now that is part, and understanding that and feeling it is part of being a thoughtful, feeling person. All of these stories early on in the quarantine about King Lear or what's to be expected, and it's just like, let's all stop trying to win quarantine. Let's just try to be.
My guest today on Tell Me What to Say is Sue Nagle. Sue, as we will learn, works in a world where I get to meet a whole variety of people, but I don't meet, quite honestly, very many Sue Nagles. Very, very unusual person in her industry, at least in my experience, having met hundreds of folks who work in this town, capital T, in the entertainment world. If you look at Sue's Wikipedia, it talks about the prolific work she did at UTA as an agent, then going on as the president of HBO Entertainment, where I had the opportunity to meet and work with her. And she is now the chief content officer at Annapurna. The real interesting thing to me personally at Annapurna is it is the place that produced and created one of my girls' favorite movies called Booksmart. And I am open enough to say that my daughter's one of her best friends, Diana Silvers, is in that movie. And it is something that is a great source of pride to her. So Sue was all part of that. Sue is nice enough to join us today on Tell Me What to Say. And the reason that I said she is unique in the town is I describe her very honestly as someone who is thoughtful, full of thought, and then the other kind of thoughtful, which is a really decent, nice person, along with being, as I learned about her, an intensely curious and a ridiculously good listener. So with that ramp up, Sue, thank you for joining us today on Tell Me What to Say.
Thank you for having me. I don't know if Zoom is conveying all the blush that I'm having. That's a very sweet intro. Wow. Very nice intro. Actually, very high praise knowing you as I do. That's very, very nice of you.
Thank you. So all post-COVID, the podcast has changed a little bit in a couple ways that I'll identify as we go. And the first one is what I guess I would just call the sincerity of the opening question. I used to say to the person when they'd get on the phone, or I was lucky enough to be sitting with them, I would say, how you doing? And that was an opening line, and then we'd go on to talk about their childhood or whatever it was. But I think, how are you doing, ... really, is the place I'd like to start. Everybody knows what everybody's gone through. Can we get your little piece of your life right now and how you're really doing?
I think it's a difficult question. I think I'm probably doing the same way that most, like thinking and feeling people in the world are doing. There's a lot that's coming at us. There's a lot of very difficult statistics, and there's a lot of fear, and there's a lot of very disturbing images that we're being met with every morning when we check the news. So how, on the other hand, we get through our days the way we get through our days. And so how is anybody doing? I think I said to you last time we spoke that I thought my body was forming into a human punctuation mark, like I'm turning into a question mark from working in bed. And you're just like, get out of bed. So I'm sitting in my garden right now, which does really help, just having some sunshine and air. I think we're taking it day by day. We're all taking it day by day. And by all of us, I mean everyone around the world who's dealing with this difficult pandemic.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, also of importance, because as I'll repeat for maybe one of the last times, Ari and I were really sort of proud, and it was a lot of fun in the first season that we made sure, because the show here is a conversation about conversation, that we believe that conversation meant in person. but people aren't letting us do that these days, both legally and otherwise. So the notion of where you actually are, I think is of importance, and also who are you in quarantine or stay at home with?
I'm lucky enough to be in Ojai. I bought a house here while I was still at UTA. I think I wanted to take on a big project, and it was a big project. It needed a lot of remodeling, and but because we were able to take that time to put it together the way that we wanted to, by we, I see my collective family. There's sort of a place for everybody. There's a lot of little different houses. It's a little bit of a compound. So we're 6 adults, 6 kids, 6 dogs, and 1 leopard gecko. And I guess I could count the bears. We've had some bears. We've had a lot of bears, unfortunately.
Bears. But let's be clear, in the compound, there is space for the gecko.
The gecko is living its best life. Lots of attention, lots of petting. The dogs, the animals have never, I think they never want the quarantine to end. They think this is their joy. There's always someone to play with them, pet them, feed them.
That's not bad. That's not bad. So in the face of, you're obviously surrounded by people that you love and pets that you love. I really want to turn, which is so interesting in the people I'm talking to, about what you're learning in this unusual time. And the way I think about it is, the obvious change is that we're all, at least for the time being, staying at home and staying put, you in the, Ojai Valley of California and us in LA and so on. But what, given what has happened, is the thing that you feel for your work as the Chief Creative Officer of Annapurna? What is the biggest change that you've confronted?
I think in the beginning of this, I was really wary of technology like Zoom. I thought it might feel awkward to kind of like force an intimacy electronically, or that I felt that it would feel that way, and that maybe these writers or my friends, everyone at this point, when you've been doing it as long as I have, everyone's, basically your friend. So whether they're at a network or they're a writer or they're at a studio, I thought, I don't know if they want to be ambushed by my face, and forced to kind of contemplate whether or not they brush their hair. But I have really learned to appreciate the opportunity to see the people that I care about and want to hear from. And I have found that once you kind of get past the interface and the idea that you're looking into an iPad or a computer, it has felt very good to connect, and that connection has helped make the work better, I think. There is nothing worse than a conference call, truly, because no one knows when to stop or when to interrupt or when to say something. And it is that kind of medium where the loudest person or the person that has the most ease in speaking does the majority of the talking, and that's not always the best way to have a conversation. And with Zoom, I think you're able to see when someone is ready to speak and give them an opening to come into the conversation, and it makes things a little bit more well-rounded. So getting adjusted to that has been one thing. There's my daughter, the Zoom bombs. I love you. That's been hard, and working. I think we forget how much energy we can all get from working inside of an office, especially when you work with people you love, and what it's like to just go into the kitchen and grab a snack and see somebody from finance or someone from production or somebody that you don't maybe interact with all day long, or creative groups together all day long. But otherwise, it's a good way to keep a company connected, and that's been hard to not have that.
Yeah. Have you in this connection on Zoom, the Zoom world, you've talked about how it's felt to you. Have you noticed generally the people that you're dealing with adjusting as well? Or have you noticed a difference in the people around you as far as how they're what you call conversing?
I've tried to, and when I say try, I also mean by example. Let people understand they don't have to be completely overproductive right now and functioning on all levels and bringing their A game every single second of the day. I think that's unfair to ask, and I think we're asking people to have a very human thinking, warm, hopefully response to the work that they're doing. To be that kind of person, you also have days when you don't really want to get out of bed, or you don't want to start your day until later, or you need to take a little bit of a time out. I mean, in my own family, I'm a big fan of the mental health day, which is, maybe it's not the right way to call such a day, but every one of my kids or the nieces all know that if they need that during the school year, they get it. And I feel the same way about adults. There's just some days where you have to be able to feel comfortable enough to be honest with your coworkers that I'm just having a hard time right now. And giving yourself that break, I think when you do re-engage with your creative work, your engagement is much more sincere.
Have you found your colleagues, obviously, the industry is going through, here comes the cliche, unprecedented time. Have you found your colleagues getting at least a little more comfortable with those kinds of conversations, being vulnerable, being, like you said, their hair not combed, but there's much more to it, right? How have you, either for yourself or the folks who, as you say, you love, how have you seen them opening up?
Well, again, if you can lead by example, I don't worry about if my hair is brushed always in the morning. I think if they were confronted with my face first thing by Zoom, and some days I do want to put on actual clothes, and other days I'm just coming as I am. But we try to start our day, a group of us, whatever combination that comes together, just talking about what we're watching and what we're reading and how we're feeling. And those conversations are very fun. I think knowing that you can't leave home, there's a our work can never really stop. There's always something to read. There's always something to watch. And if you encourage people to see this time as a moment of reflection also, you don't have to watch something for work. You can watch. Wanted to see one night, which is what, and then hearing what people are drawn to is interesting, both because it's hopefully giving them some pleasure and some peace, but also it's just a way of thinking about how we all may feel beyond this quarantine. It's difficult to watch things that are very hard right now, that are cynical, I find. And I'm not sure what tolerance, the viewing public, whether it's a movie or a television show, will feel coming out of this. I don't know how much room for cynicism there will be in entertainment.
Well, instead of looking forward, I want to go backwards, because you just described a very, very meaningful, other-oriented kind of conversation in your meetings, which is just great. I mean, I couldn't coach it better than what you just said. You go around the table, you see how people are feeling, and then that opens up the conversation. But in the spirit of going backwards, let's say that you're an A- at that approach now. B+, A-. How were you on those dimensions before the pandemic? Taking your time, listening to people, appreciating their situation as the leader. What grade would you have given yourself pre-pandemic?
I'm pretty tough on myself. I would give me a B, probably still a B+ for intention. But in action, probably, in moments of B-, you can get bogged down pretty quickly with administrative responsibilities, or when we're in production, there tend to be emergencies that come up. production is, you know, that super intense, contained period of time where you're burning money by the minute. And when something goes wrong, that can take everyone's attention. So I try to be the kind of person or colleague that walks into people's offices or like gets people to sit down for a second and talk. All of our staff meetings when we were working in the same building included all of the executives and the assistants, and everybody has an equal voice in that room, which I think is important. But I'm probably, at this point, we try to all still get together once a week by Zoom. I try to not have too much of an agenda for that. I'm curious to hear if somebody's, 28 and they're really ambitious and they are learning, because they always call these assistant jobs as sort of like a graduate school, and as I always say, like if the thing you're most proud of is how tight your phone sheet is or how quickly you can answer a call, like you're focused in the wrong area. You're like here to learn and to ask questions. And I think this time has allowed for a little bit more of that. And I keep encouraging them to think more and to remember that they're training for something. I think we all should be fairly hard on ourselves in the best of times. And then when we're dealing with something like this, you have to remind yourself to be available and to listen, and then also to act. Because sometimes people have a great idea, and in the normal course of a day, things get incredibly busy and nothing can happen. And if you are that 26-year-old or 27-year-old and you have a really great idea, and great ideas, as come from all corners of the room and in all corners of a company, and that idea is well received, you want to see it put into action. So that's another responsibility I think we all have, like whether, everyone is in a bit of a leadership position in an organization, whether you're looking at a traditional org chart or you're remembering that, I'm a big, and this is probably from UTA, a big proponent of promoting from within. Agencies are all homegrown. So that's how I see it. I see every person who comes in, whether they start at reception or they start on a desk, they're learning to kind of hopefully one day take my job.
Got it. So we went backwards and now we go forwards. Now you're sitting in your garden and it is, despite everything, it's a lovely day and you're relaxed. So thinking forward for a second, what is the one thing, or you could take two, that you would want to make sure you keep doing, that you have that has really been started during this time? Once, as they say, the town opens up again, is there something that you want to make sure you carry forward? This
is pretty basic, but I'm also, ashamed to say that it hasn't had as much priority as it needs to. And I think I've been looking at how to bring that forward when we reemerge or we come back together, and that's probably just family dinner. I am the kind of person that has in my calendar a Monday night family dinner, no questions. That's what happens. But I'm not the person that has it in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Friday I'm always home too, but I don't have it in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, because you have to allow for work meetings or dinners or sometimes, screenings. So there's things that can happen at night. And I think I've really been looking at, first of all, how much we've gotten out of it. I'm lucky enough to be with multiple generations. My parents are here, we're here, and then there's these kids, and coming together at dinner and also letting them know that it doesn't need to be an A+ performance every night. Or sometimes my mom will bring out kind of table topics and I can see the kids like, oh no, now we have to contribute something meaningful. And it's really not. Sometimes everyone is, talks about what their first memory of a dessert is. And that's a really great conversation. And a way to learn about each other's lives, and my parents especially, to share their memories of growing up. And other times we just talk about whatever, but that has been really wonderful. And the ability to kind of turn my phone off at 6 p.m. I think I mentioned to you, my parents have started this kind of cocktail hour at 6 p.m. Where we all get together, drinks optional, and have a little snack and just talk. It's signaled to the kids and to the adults that that's when we stop. And I can't say that I had enough of that in my life before. Right. And it's really nice.
And the thing that, I was going to say sorry for the coaching, but the thing that will make that happen.
I'll take it.
It's, for anybody who's heard this example and anybody thinking about building new habits, it's number one, understanding that how to do it already. So to say, well, how do I manage to do that? How is the wrong question, right? So many people think that it's the how. Well, all the books and all the coaches and everybody, we're filled up with hows. The point is, what is it going to take to go from the skill of doing it to the will to do it? And and that's tying the intention, right? It's a good idea. I really want to do that, to making sure, well, you fortunately have, in your case, parents who make sure that it happens. So the question going forward then is, what is it to go from, well, that sounds like a really good thing, to like your Monday night calendar entry, right, for family dinner. Right. Are you willing to put as a reminder your Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday calendar entry, and to cross over to that kind of commitment? Because as we know, we're pretty much slaves to our calendar, and we do what our calendar says. So that will increase the willingness and the opportunity to practice. Because what I'm finding, is your answer is representative of almost every single kind of answer I'm hearing to that question.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And here's the irony. We knew it was important before. That was our backwards time travel question. And now the pain and the suffering and the sacrifice and the weirdness and the fear has all burned away a whole bunch of resistance to doing what we know is essential, right? And that's without going into it. That's where the podcast started. Was conversation is, life turns on conversations. It says on my Instagram page at the top. And you just gave a perfect example. You could have picked anything. I'm going to walk outside more. I'm going to, lose 5 pounds or gain 5 pounds. But
I really like to have great abs, but I'm okay with that not happening.
Well, you get to do that too. But the point is, at the end of the proverbial day, we come into the world in search of connection, and we leave the world. You talk to a bunch of very, very old people, and this time has highlighted the importance of conversation to the very end. And that is, you've beautifully illustrated that with your mom's table topics. That's an example.
Yes, with my mom's table topics. But, in the 90s, which is when I really grew up as a young agent and as an assistant, you have to remember the culture at that time. And there was nothing wrong with it. It was how everyone was living. It was a way of showing your worth or your dedication was by working these crazy, crazy hours. And, there's all very, very famously noted, and a person I admire a great deal, Jeffrey Katzenberg, would have 3 breakfasts in the morning, and I think when you kind of move to the prime spot, you're like, I made it. I'm meeting him on the later side. Maybe that wasn't the prime for him because he was probably exhausted. But, there was showing that you cared about your job, you cared about your clients by just killing for them. That's the impression. But in a lot of ways also killing yourself, because that level of intensity, I'm not sure as I've gotten older is the best way to think and the best way to do. And I have seen the agency culture has shifted in that regard, and HBO did a much better job of that balance. Mike was very good about leaving the office at a certain time, and I had a hard time adjusting at first. I remember him, I would get to my desk at 8:30 in the morning, and I remember he came by and he was like, what's going on here? You don't have to be at your desk at 8:30.
Right.
And that kind of, that started to loosen it up. But now I think about the example I'm setting. A lot of my colleagues are married. Some of them are thinking about starting families. I don't want them to think a staff meeting at 5:30 on a Friday is a normal idea. It's not. When you stop and have that family dinner, you stop and have that cocktail hour, it doesn't mean your work is done. It means you're making a commitment to your family during that period of time. I still check my email before I go to sleep or after dinner. I still, get caught up on my reading or watch the cut that I need to watch. My work doesn't end.
Right.
But my kids get put to bed with a story and a kiss. Not my teenagers. They won't have it. They give me the tops of their heads. But and everybody else has had that moment to get together, and that's meaningful, so it's a different way of showing a full and balanced life. And that's where we'll do our best work.
I mean, that's where the great stories, I think, will come from. I mean, that's what I believe it, at least for me, this time has been, as you might have observed or other people observed, this has been the most, if you will, prolific time. I remember clawing my way into your office after you left HBO, and I swore to you I was going to write this book, and would you read it for me? And I have this very clear memory of that, and you know how long ago that was. But what has helped is this time has helped me understand where I think I feel like I can have the most impact. It has clarified things, which is the same thing you've said, and mine happens to be, going to some other mediums, but at the same time, it's been an incredibly generative time. Obviously once the health is taken care of, which is all that really matters. But anyway, your story really strikes me of the family dinner. Let me ask you just a couple other things. Knowing what you've accomplished, I am sure, quite confident that people have come to you for a long time about advice about how to be creative and successful and all the rest. What do you tell the creative that's listening to this about being creative during COVID, right? I mean, if I could do the alliteration. Sorry about that. But what advice for those who are saying they're stuck or they're scared or and all these things? How, if any way, are you able to, you think, help them?
I don't know if the concept of self-discipline really holds up during this time. I think that's a way of being too hard on yourself. It's a way of trying to, that idea of discipline it's got a negative connotation, first of all, because we all think about, go cut yourself a switch. But I think it's about understanding and creativity. Things ebb and flow. I'm lucky enough because they're really great friends and great to be with. I'm really close friends with a lot of writers, so I see how they do their day. One of my closest friends is a novelist. I see how he structures his day. It doesn't always just come. You can't just sit down and say, I'm going to sit and write, or I'm going to read the script and have a really thoughtful response to it. If you have to be in the right mindset, and if you're the executive or the producer that's reading that material and you're not in the right mindset to sit and read it, you're too distracted, or there's too much anxiety, or you're worrying, you have to remember it's not the most respectful way to approach someone's work, because whatever time it takes you to read that script, an hour and a half, another half hour, 45 minutes, or an hour to have a thoughtful response is so small compared to how long it took the person to write it.
Yeah.
And, my fiance spends a lot of time, out in the office writing. She does work on a schedule, much like we're all slaves to our schedules, and I work on a schedule, and her schedule has her leaving the house at the same time every day. But some days she's really prolific, and other days she's not. But it's understanding and being appreciative of when it comes and you feel good about your work, and then letting yourself off the hook. Creativity just doesn't work that way. And no matter how balanced or how shielded or how open you are, there is a level of anxiety in the world right now that is part, and understanding that and feeling it is part of being a thoughtful, feeling person.
Right.
So all of these stories early on in the quarantine about King Lear or what's to be expected, and it's just like, let's all stop trying to win quarantine. Let's just try to be and read. And I do find for my creative work, when I'm a little bit stuck in how I'm thinking about something, I try to read. That's my go-to. And I read, when I say read, I mean read for pleasure, like read older books, read books I've read before, appreciating what I got from them the first time and what I might get from them now. And that kind of resets me. And I think that's true for whether you're a writer or a producer or an executive or anybody in any business. Reading is a pleasure.
Well, that gives me the good out here when I'm gonna proudly steal from another podcast, which
Great.
I highly recommend that people listen to, called The Ezra Klein Show.
Oh yeah.
So Ezra ends every show. He was talking. He forces this question, but it's not a force to you because you just perfectly laid it out. In this time, whether it's about creativity or life or love or marriage or whatever it may be, what are the 3 books, Ezra says, that you would recommend that have helped you either through this time or through other important times in your life?
Well, I go back to Prayer for Owen Meany quite a bit, and I've gotten a lot out of it at different points in my life. It's a beautifully written book, and it's also a book that, depending on where you are emotionally, it does allow you to cry, and that can feel quite cathartic. I do like books that are nonfiction as well. I'm reading Rebecca Solnit's new book right now, and I find her to be such a deep thinker and so wise, and seeing how someone is sharing their own experiences and how they're seeing the world is a way to open yourself up too. The third book, I will say right now I'm spending a lot of time as we're realizing and feeling that we are a connected world. In the same way that I have such appreciation for how Netflix has so many foreign language shows on their platform. We don't have the ability to travel right now, but I love to get into the mindset of, maybe a dark Scandi drama, but how they see the world and how they live. And I have gone back a few times, speaking of my friend who's a novelist, who wrote a book called We Are the Weather. That's about, it's about factory farming. It's about climate change. It's about the choices that we make and how we eat, and that mindfulness, and that reminder that every action we have affects our world. It resets me a bit too. So I would say those 3 are the ones I've been reading right now.
So if I'm correct, and I hear that correctly, because We Are the Weather is one of the most motivational, for the lack of a better word, books by Jonathan Safran Foer, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Sure are.
He also, please let me then recommend, my mind just, you just blew my mind with the We Are the Weather notion. And so you're all hearing a mind be blown in lifetime. Please, anybody, look up How to Be Alone.
Yep.
The op-ed that he wrote in the New York Times. I read it yesterday and I read it the day before. About the notion of genuine connection in a time where technology has become our channel. One of the most important things I've read in the past, since I've heard about it and watched his speech that preceded it. So thank you for that. We Are the Weather that changed my eating habits somewhat.
Yep. That's all that book asks, which is one of the beautiful things about it. It doesn't ask you to become the complete 100% change how you are, change how you eat. It talks about modification, which I think is a really powerful idea.
Fair, yeah. He admits eating a burger or two, but also doing a whole bunch of right things. And interesting. This is living proof that books can be very important conversations. So Sue, as I would have suspected and as I hoped, given that we only came up with this idea a few days ago, thank you so much for showing up like this. And I knew I had the faith you would, and you did.
I didn't want to let you down, that's for sure.
Well, you can tell the 50 other people and the animals, and please let the gecko know how much we appreciate him or her giving you the time. So this has been Sue Nagle with Drew Kugler on Tell Me What to Say, and thanks again, Sue.
Thank you for having me.